No, I think so going through the whole Bible, that part is wild because you started in January, and your first it was like 2 or 3 weeks, you were going over the first 5 books of the Bible.
Yep.
And so Thomas literally had like a. It was
those are some dense books too,
right? And but he had like a 3 or 4 inch, like 3-ring binder that like we
just
had in
the
high
first
school
5 books,
that were line by line breakdown.
Yeah.
Of the first 5 books, and now you've been going through all of the books since then.
Yep.
What book are you on now?
We're going into the minor prophets, so almost to New Testament.
Okay,
Why are they called minor prophets?
because they're minor, they're not major.
So they're a little bit
Yeah,
sour. There's like a little bit, little darker.
Are you in like single A, double A, triple A prophets?
No, see, I went right to the music thing, thinking major was like positive sounding, minor is a little heavier, darker.
Yeah.
Why are they called minor? Is that which
That's
one?
actually a great question. I don't actually know the real reason. I do know that like major prophets were spoken directly by God, that you are to speak the word from Him.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that like minor prophets probably have the same type of living through that, but I do know that like God actually spoke directly to these people, like Daniel, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, all those guys.
And then I feel like the minor prophets are also the ones that a very, very small amount of people actually know anything about. They have all the weird names.
Yeah.
Habakkuk.
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 I don't know. Matt, did you
So
Google?
they're called the minor prophets because they're comparatively short to the 4 major prophets, those being Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel.
So they're just not as good.
So not as long.
They're not
Oh,
as long.
yeah.
It is not because they are insignificant. It's just they're short.
Right. Habakkuk.
Short in stature.
Right.
Yeah, they're all 5'7".
No, but talk to us about that experience of going literally through the Bible, line by line, verse by verse.
So there's a pastor named that created this. We call it the Bible Survey. And throughout the entire survey, it almost goes line by line. It's not exactly line by line, but it goes almost line by line of going in deeper about what the words actually mean. So there are a lot of symbolisms that come from the Old Testament to the New Testament. There are a lot of families a lot of families are spoken about in the Old Testament, and they go into great detail about why the families are actually important when you read those in the Bible.
Can you give us like an example? Like what's one that sticks out?
I mean, you can always go with Jacob, just the line of Jacob, or the line of King David, of Jesus being in that line later on in life. But I think the biggest thing that I've realized about learning about the families is when I started going through the survey, it showed me the story of the Bible. It didn't just like, when I've read the Bible before, it's just been like, oh, I'm reading these words, I'm trying to understand what's happening, but there is a story in the Bible. And so being able to understand that story and be able to follow the family genealogy of going through the Bible to what goes into the New Testament is really the biggest thing to me, what has affected me.
So is it Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, that starts with like the big genealogy of Christ? I think it is Matthew.
I haven't gotten there yet in Bible school.
Yeah, right. But I guess in my head, I'm just thinking about
talking about numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It's Matthew.
Matthew. Thank you, Matt. I can't say what I'm thinking. But I guess like what I'm hearing there is like it's understanding the stories of these people and these families is just providing more context to how you read the Old Testament.
Do you remember what the weird one with Ruth is that I didn't realize till I read it? Like how Ruth, like the book of the Bible, Ruth. Have you gone over Ruth yet?
Yeah.
Who she is and where she's at in a genealogy is very, very interesting.
Yep.
And I can't remember all the details off the top of my head. I don't know if you do either.
I know what you're
We can
speaking
get Matt
of.
to look them up.
I believe Ruth is in the genealogy of Jesus.
I think she is. She's related through to David.
Yeah.
Can you look that up, Matt? How Ruth fits into the genealogies I thought it was super interesting when I read it, and then I forgot the details about it, which makes me seem dumb. But
Yeah, no, I mean, like right off the spot right now, I can't think of, but I know what you're speaking of because we went over it. I just need to.
it's like how she's
remember
weirdly
more.
related, but I don't know.
Hmm.
It's a weird thing.
Is that because it was just a relatively smaller community?
I don't know,
These
and
people-
I also wonder if, like, because a lot of these stories, the Old Testament was passed down. There were scrolls and things, but the scrolls were only
Right,
like there was
kept in
like
the
one
temple.
copy
Yeah,
of them
yeah,
in
right.
the temple, and so a lot of these were passed down
Orally.
verbally,
Yeah,
orally, and so I feel like keeping the genealogy straight as they are was also a way of like confirming.
they were
the
validating,
authenticity
yeah,
of
yeah,
them.
Well, they were also like carried in the Ark of God,
right.
and so like the Ark traveled to different areas, which people were able to see these scrolls in real life
Right.
and be able to hear pastors speak.
But
or
from what I
priests
know
speak
from
about them.
Indiana Jones, that
Yes.
ark got lost at some
Yeah.
point.
And also from what I know from Dan Brown's books, the Ark of the Covenant was actually a person, not a box.
So
Really?
I'm talking.
Is it a fictional thing, or is it a-
No, it's totally
Oh,
fictional.
okay. I was
What
like-
was
I
that
like,
book called? They made a
whoa.
movie, Angels, and
Demons, yeah,
No,
with-
but there was another one, like the Da Vinci,
Vinci
Code.
Code.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Tom Hanks.
Ruth is the great grandmother of Jesus. So it goes Ruth and Boaz had Obed. Obed had Jesse. Jesse had
So
David.
the stories,
David
this
had
is where it
Jesus.
gets like weird to me, because like the stories then of Ruth are only, according to that,
To
100 years.
Well, yeah, because back then, I mean, if you go way back, they lived a really long time. But if you look at historically, like the lifespans of the people who lived,
Did they, or did they
2,000
count
years
years
ago.
differently?
No, I mean the way that we've been, or I've been taught, is that like Adam and Eve, right? It says that they lived 900 plus years, and the reason for that is because they had perfect DNA. They didn't have different
Interesting.
mixtures inside their DNA that would create mutations or create diseases or whatever it was. I mean, they were the perfect human beings.
Are you guys also reading, like, when you go line by line and you go through, are you looking at like the Old Testament? Are you looking at like the original like Hebrew
Yeah.
and breaking those words down?
Yeah. So I mean, not all the time, but yes, most of the time
Right.
there are definitions of what the actual words mean.
Right. Because it's like, it's super interesting because I, like, in Blue Letter Bible, which I use all the time,
Yep.
like looked up the words in Genesis when they're going through the years of like Methuselah and all these different people. And the word that they use, it can also be like used for months
Yep.
and for weeks. Like it can be used for several different
Yep.
times. So there's like
Just
so many
denotes a passage of
discussions
time, yeah.
around it
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
like it's one of those things that I don't think actually matters.
Yeah, I mean the year calendar wasn't created at
That's-
that point, but
yeah.
like
Gregorian
God
calendar.
says that He created day and night, and so you have the knowledge that in Genesis there was day and night, which is considered a full circle of the day.
Right.
Hmm. I think it's true though. It's we get hung up.
Interesting.
I feel like we keep coming back to this. We get hung up on the little things
Right.
and of like what's the passage of time because it makes sense in our heads,
Right.
and we've only experienced this life with time.
Yep.
But if we believe that God exists outside of that, we're just trying to put it in a box so that we can rationalize things. And every time I do that, I think I find myself in a spot where I'm like, there's something more going on here. What am I missing? Because I'm
Right.
like trivializing, like just thinking about like
Right.
the specifics of like, so how close to Ruth was, how many
Right.
years passed?
Right,
And it's like,
which
was
is
like,
where we
which is like,
started at.
I'm saying like, right. Like what's the bigger picture in the story
Right.
of Ruth or in why Ruth is mentioned in Matthew?
Right. But
Like,
Ruth is 4 chapters long, 6 chapters long. It's very 2
Yeah,
chapters long. It's very.
It's either
short.
4 or 6.
It's super short. But I like read that like she was in that genealogy, the great grandmother, I believe is what you said.
Great.
Great.
It's
Great
4
great
chapters.
grandmother. And in the line of David, right, that went all the way down. It's just, I don't know. It's so interesting. And I think it's really, really cool for you
Mm.
to be getting this like experience.
Yeah. And I think it's also like what's great about it is I'm gonna have all of this survey for the rest of my life. Like
Right.
they give us printed copies, and so it's not the Bible, but it goes in depth of everything in the Bible. And I mean, I probably have a foot and a half now. If I stacked all of the binders together,
Right.
about a foot and a half of knowledge, and we're just in the Old Testament right now.
Right.